Aloha mai kākou. Welcome to another episode of WāKahikoWednesday. My name is Iāsona. I'm one of the culture educators here at the Bernice Pauahi BishopMuseum. And I'm coming to you live today from inside of a very special part of our museum here in the Hawaiian Hall complex. We call this the Kahili Room. And a main focus in here is on the ali'i, the royal families of Hawaii, particularly the Hawaiian Kingdom. And particular person I want to look at today is Princess Victoria Kamāmalu. And the reason I want to highlight her today is that coming up next Tuesday, November 1st, is in fact her birthday. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to get to know her better, understand her story. And so one thing we can see is that there's a lovely portrait of her. We can see her as an adult, dressed very finely, of course, in the typical sort of fashion of the time. This is the Victorian era, and so she's born in 1838, growing up under the rule of her uncle, King Kamehameha III. So she herself is a granddaughter of the first King Kamehameha, who founds this kingdom, unites the islands. Her mother is Kina'u, one of the daughters of Kamehameha. Her father is Mataio Kekuanao'a, and she's the sister as well to Alexander Liholiho and Kapoiva, who will eventually come to rule after their uncle to become then Kamehameha IV as well as Kamehameha V. So we'll get to see them a little bit more in a moment, but what I really wanted to focus on as well is we're here in the Kahili Room, and it's named for this collection of kahili. So this is an example of what we call the kahili ku, or standing kahili, which is this type of larger size and also has its stand to be left somewhere more permanently. We also have examples of smaller kahili that don't have a stand, that are always going to be carried by someone. And so they're being used in this way, carried or perhaps put on display to indicate a connection to the ali'i, to these royal persons, either the direct presence of the ali'i or perhaps kahili that is left in a place. This is showing that this is perhaps a place where the ali'i live, some kind of connection such as that. There's important parts that we can see. Maybe if we start from the bottom, we can take a look. And this one is a great example because it has, on the one hand, ivory to start, then turtle shell. And these are actually rings of turtle shell that have been put onto also a wooden pole. And as you go up, you'll be able to see where the shell rings stop and it turns into just the wooden pole. This one is also trimmed with some fabric and the ribbon. And then we come to the main event, really, which are the feathers. Now, at the top and bottom, those black feathers come from the iwa, or the frigate bird. And then feathers in between, unfortunately, given the age of this artifact, these feathers have faded, they have lost much of their color. But when this was first made, we would have seen a vibrant red and yellow display, red coming from the i'iwi, yellow coming from the mamu. Now there's an important distinction I'd like to point out between the two colors. So the i'iwi, if you were to see one, you would observe that it's a red bird, mostly red feathers all over its body. But the mamu is a bird that actually is mostly black, having maybe 6 to 8 yellow feathers by the wings, maybe by the tail, and that's it. So the yellow feathers actually take on great significance and value because there's so few to be found with each of these birds. But they are very sensitive, especially to light, so just exposure to light over time will cause them to fade from those vibrant colors like we saw. Now, moving on from this kahili, and this is a kahili that was made for Victoria Kamāmalu, so this is associated with her, which is why I pointed out especially. But as we look next to her kahili, we also see this image of one of her brothers, Kapoiva, who rules as King Kamehameha V, and he's next to their brother, Alexander Liholiho, who also rules. He is King Kamehameha IV. So he is the first to ascend to the throne. And when he does that, he actually puts his sister, Princess Kamāmalu, into a very important position because she now takes the role of Kuhina Nui. And this, we can think of this as basically being second in command to the reigning monarch, in this case to the king. This is a position that is first occupied by Queen Ka'ahumanu, who was one of the wives of the first King Kamehameha. After his death, Ka'ahumanu creates this position, or is the first to occupy this position at least. It follows after her with Kina'u, who is the mother of these ali'i we've been discussing, as well as Kekauluohi, another daughter of Kamehameha, and then Victoria Kamāmalu becomes the fourth, and actually takes the title similar to how the kings are taking the Kamehameha title. Victoria Kamāmalu now takes the title Ka'ahumanu the fourth, as she becomes the new Kuhina Nui, serving underneath her brother. This becomes critically important at a particular moment when her brother passes away, and at the time, the official heir in terms of legally under the Constitution is still Kamehameha IV's son, Prince Albert Edward Kauikeaouli. Tragically, the young prince has already died at the age of 4. He is still named the heir legally. There is a process in motion to change this now to their brother Lakapoiva to take over instead, but this hasn't been totally formalized. So rather than that transition happening smoothly, the actual rule of the kingdom falls on to Princess Kamāmalu. She becomes the head of state just for one day, when she immediately declares that her brother will now take over, now become Kamehameha V. So she does much important work, of course, in this very important office, but in this particular moment, she is in charge of the nation, and she steers the future by putting her brother on the throne. Let's take a walk this way and get a bit more of her story, as well as see another one of her kahili. So this kahili that we can see here also is connected to Princess Victoria Kamāmalu, and the feathers are a bit different. We see there are kauae, or tropic bird feathers, that are used on the top and bottom as the trim, and we see lots of red feathers. And now this is an interesting mix, because some of these are actual iiwi feathers, and some of them, and this could explain why there's much more color still to be seen, some of them are actually dyed rooster feathers. So they've been dyed that red color. And this speaks to something that's going on in this period, which we got a sense of actually with how the young prince has died. These ali'i are dying relatively young, and this is due to the changes taking place in this period, such as Western contact happening, new diseases coming in because of this. Well, this affects the people, of course, but there's also an effect on many other native species, including some of these native birds. So as these native birds, where the feathers traditionally come from, become scarcer, these dyed feathers are being used in their place to supplement the lack of the actual feathers that were used before. Now, in this corner, we find another connection to Princess Kamāmalu besides her kahili. We can see that she's connected to another king. So after the death of King Kamehameha V, he is succeeded by King Lunalilo. And now Lunalilo is a cousin to this whole family, and he is perhaps a grandson, but more likely a grandnephew of the first Kamehameha, so now he's a bit more on the outer edge of this genealogy. But particularly for Kamāmalu, he's significant because when they are still children, towards the end of Kamāmalu's mother's life, so as Kina'u is reaching the end of her life, she leaves some wishes for her children, and one of them is for her daughter, Kamāmalu, to marry Lunalilo. So setting up this pairing between these two royal people. Now, they have this engagement in place for much of their lives as they grow into adulthood, But when then Alexander Liholiho becomes Kamehameha IV, there's speculation as to the reason, but for whatever reason, he feels that this marriage is not going to be good, and so he blocks it. He says that their engagement is not allowed, or their marriage is not allowed, their engagement should be ended. And as he is the king, he is able to do this, and so the marriage engagement is blocked, and then there's a lot of ups and downs from there. It's back on, it's off again. There's a very tumultuous and ultimately sad story, because there's this on and off with this engagement. Ultimately, Victoria Kamāmalu dies in 1866, and she's about 27 years old. Liholiho lives a bit longer. 1874, he passes away at the age of 39. Neither of them marry, neither of them have any children, and it's something of a tragic story that's part of this larger tale of this end of the Kamehameha line, but particularly to read into this history and see this tale of love and loss and ultimately these folks dying so young. An interesting mirror to the story of the birds. That's very much the story of these kahili. But at this point, we have still this place, these stories, to keep this history alive, and we will certainly be thinking of Princess Kamāmalu as her birthday comes around this coming Tuesday. Other than that, we'll see you again next week for another WāKahiko Wednesday. Again, I'm Iāsona, coming to you from the Bishop Museum. We'd love to see you visit in person, or you can always visit our website, bishopmuseum.org. Ahuiho, we'll see you again.